Hey guys, Dan here, aka Wolf, and today we're going to talk about how I went from being a baby mode gamer, always playing my games on the easiest difficulties, to doing something I never saw myself doing, which is beating The Last of Us Part 1, the Left Behind DLC, and The Last of Us Part 2 on Grounded. Not just once, but as of this video, I've already completed Part 1 and Part 2 twice on Grounded and Left Behind once. And yes, for Part 2, that means without any of the combat accessibility options enabled. I've beat Part 2 twice the actual authentic way Grounded is meant to be played, and I'm going to tell you how I found myself in that strange and satisfying place. We're going to talk about which of the games has the more difficult Grounded difficulty, at least in my opinion, and we will also get into some of the strategies I use to get through some of the more tricky bits. But first, I'm going to ask you, if you are jamming out to the content I produce, subscribe to me. Leverage the unrivaled power of that notification bell, and don't forget to leave your love in the comments. Come talk to me on Twitch, where I stream throughout the week, and we are always having the fun and engaging with each other in interesting and unique ways. After all, you never know what I'm going to come up with next. As many of you know, a long time ago, I published a video on how you can complete Grounded on The Last of Us Part 2 without the challenge. And while I am still a proponent of people having the right to play single-player games their way when it doesn't affect anyone else, this video is about how I went from playing The Last of Us on its easiest modes to finding myself playing and beating the game on Grounded the authentic way. Two things factored into the path that led me to eventually playing Grounded. First of all, about a year ago when I first started streaming, when I was revisiting The Last of Us Part 1, I found myself nervously bumping up the difficulty to normal because I wanted to unlock more cosmetics for Joel and Ellie. What I discovered in my normal playthrough was that the changes between easy and normal were not as drastic as I expected them to be. It was also around this time that I met my friend Cory Caliber. And I observed very early on that he and I were starting from a very similar mindset and skill level, having been playing on easier modes and slowly venturing into the next difficulty up, whether it was us playing Part 1 or Part 2. Regardless of which The Last of Us I was playing, I personally found that each time I bumped up the difficulty, the disparity between the difficulty I had previously played and the new difficulty was never huge and certainly never beyond my meager capabilities, because I'm certainly no great gamer. It's important to note that I never did this with the goal of eventually playing Grounded. In my mind, in the wilderness of the mental, Grounded was something that was always going to be beyond me, something that would always be too hard for me. Each time I bumped up the difficulty, especially in Part 1, I was doing this to unlock cosmetics, not to get myself ready for Grounded. Fast forward some months, I observed that my buddy Cory Caliber, despite us starting out in similar places, Cory had by far exceeded me. He had not only beaten the games on Grounded, but he was already practicing strats for permadeath runs. I specifically remember watching his first streams, I remember his original hesitation about increasing difficulty, and I remember how it reminded me of myself. So if Cory was already through Grounded and now practicing permadeath runs, then maybe I could actually beat the game on Grounded too. So in the fall of 2021, I decided to prepare myself for actually doing Grounded runs. I did some research to see which game was considered to have the most difficult Grounded mode, and I even asked on the Last of Us subreddit, but I didn't get a whole lot of responses. From what little I could find, the consensus seemed to be that Left Behind or Part 2 was the hardest, and that Part 1 was the easiest, if such a word could even be applied. This gave me the goal of setting out to complete Part 1 on Grounded first, and then beat what was considered to be the more difficult games next. At this point, I had already played Part 1 up to hard difficulty, and I had played Part 2 on all difficulties but with combat accessibility options enabled, so how prepared I was for an authentic play of Part 2, I had no idea. But I figured I'd just cross that bridge when I got to it, because for now I was focusing on Part 1. So I set out playing Part 1 on Survivor difficulty without using Listen mode, which actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, much as I had experienced on my normal and hard mode playthroughs. In fact, you get accustomed to not using Listen mode very quickly. It will surprise you how easy it is to live without it. I found the Survivor difficulty encounters very doable, very much within my skill level. Once I completed Survivor, I immediately went into my Grounded playthrough, so those playthroughs were back to back. And if you'd actually like to see for yourself how I did, you can head on over to my Wolf of Thorns streams channel, where I archive all of my streams. My first Grounded playthrough of Part 1 starts in the middle of episode 220 and finishes up on episode 230. So that will show you a beat by beat of my mindset and my initial approach on that very first playthrough. Most of the complaints I hear about Grounded for all of the games is not having enough material, so I went into my Grounded playthroughs with the mindset that I wouldn't use ammo unless I absolutely had to, and you will find that much of the game can be stealthed through. A few encounters can actually be ran through without fighting, and only certain encounters require you to use ammo and mats. Aside from my very first playthrough of Part 1 Grounded, I was usually very material rich, especially in Part 2, which makes all the portions that can't be stealthed or bypassed by running so much easier. So here are some things you may not know about Part 1 Grounded that may be useful to you. 1. The revolver is a one-shot kill to any human that is not armored, but if they're wearing armor, you can still shoot them below the waist for a one-shot kill. 2. Part 1 bloaters are weak in the legs for some reason and take double damage when on fire, and there are only 2 bloaters in the entire game that you absolutely have to fight, and that's the first one in the gym at Billstown and the one in the coal mine with David. 3. You will not have enough material on Grounded to make shivs for all of the shiv doors, so choose which shiv doors you wish to open wisely. There are guides on the internet that tell you everything that is inside each one, and spoiler alert, Pittsburgh has some of the best shiv door content. 4. Always save at least one shiv for the Salt Lake City tunnel so that you can stealth past all of the infected on your way to make mayhem at St. Mary's. And 5. Save most of your parts to complete the armor-piercing upgrades for the hunting rifle and the El Diablo for an easier time at St. Mary's, though you can still shoot the armored boys with a revolver and their unprotected legs. In summary for Part 1 though, I found the actual resources and enemies of Grounded to be seemingly identical to Survivor mode. The biggest difference that really stood out to me the most was Part 1 Grounded's checkpoints. The checkpoints are far more spaced apart in Part 1's Grounded, which my friend Roger Casuelas had warned me about, with the checkpoints oftentimes being the length of what would typically equate to 3 separate encounters on all of the other difficulties. It was still doable, though the most difficult portions of the game I found to be the hydroelectric dam, the suburban sniper, I see you, and the coal mine portions with Ellie and David. You might be wondering why I didn't include the Pittsburgh Hotel basement, the Pittsburgh bookstore, the Pittsburgh sewers, or the Salt Lake City tunnels, and that's because they can all be ran through or stealth through without too much difficulty. And even with the sniper, there's a fast and easy way to get to him, but I didn't discover that until my second Grounded playthrough. Let's just go through the game starting at the beginning, and I'll point out anything significant that I feel is of note in your Part 1 Grounded playthrough, at least based on my experience. All of the encounters with Robert's goons and with the Fedra soldiers with Marlene are just a good way to get you accustomed to stealthing, since much of the game can be stealth through. You really shouldn't be shooting at all here, just stealth and kill. I mean, if you want to squeeze off a shot during that first encounter, that's fine, though Tess will eventually kill those guys. Your first real experience of the extended Grounded checkpoints is going to come at the Capitol building, where you'll have to go from this part right here all the way past the swans to your underground escape. You should be able to stealth and melee your way until the final room, where you can either stealth or, when the coast is clear enough, run all the way out and to the underground. Billstown ain't so bad when you break it down. Some of it will just be trial and error as you figure out what you can stealth and what you need to spend material on. The upside down trap is just trial and error. I actually did way better at this on my first playthrough than I did on my second. Thanks to my friend Mr. Monocle, I learned that this house with all of the clickers can be completely stealth through, so that is super helpful. On the way to the school, it's all about running and meleeing, making sure to stagger with throwables as you need to. The inside of the school can be a bit tricky, and there's probably better ways to do it than I did, but I found being aggressive here to work best on our way to the gymnasium. What I will say is that before you enter the gymnasium, make sure you have your weapon tree selected with the weapons you want to fight the bloater with. Otherwise, you'll be stuck swapping them out at the beginning of each attempt, which takes a long time and makes Joel vulnerable. I ended up using a bomb on him the first time to soften him up, but during my second Grounded fight against him on episode 248, Cory Caliber let me know that the bloater takes double damage when he's on fire, so use that strat to take him down easily, setting him on fire first and then shooting him in the legs. For push starting the truck, it can be some annoying trial and error. Throw staggering is your friend, and remember that anytime an ally is melee locked with an enemy, you can melee that enemy down, even if it's a clicker. The Pittsburgh ambush is going to be a mix of stealthing and shooting these boys. It can be annoying, but you'll eventually be able to manage it. When Joel and Ellie are approaching the bookstore and that initial hunter patrol hops down, you just hide and wait for them to walk off before proceeding. Instead of dealing with all of the hunters in the bookstore, stealth the ones that are in your way, but work towards navigating through the bookstore instead of using a kill-all strat, since there are just so many of them. The Pittsburgh hotel rooms are mainly a stealth strat that ain't too bad once you gain enough intel for yourself through trial and error. For the cozy Pittsburgh basement with that notorious generator we all love, this whole thing thing really breaks down into two parts. One, before you start the generator, and two, after you start the generator, as far as framing this encounter in your mind. Before you start the generator, locate that keycard room, noting that as soon as you go pick up the keycard itself, 4 stalkers will spawn that you can either shotgun or bottle brick stagger and melee down as you see fit. Once you do this, nothing will spawn until you start the generator. So during this time, you need to get intel on the area. Go down to the generator and run the path from the generator to the keycard door. Get that path well set in your mind. Run it a few times before starting the generator and make sure that you have a bottle or a brick handy to stagger a stalker that's going to try and grab you on your way to the door. Once you start the generator, run the path that you've been practicing. This will take you right by the bloater, but that's okay. Just keep running to the door and spam the triangle button. But before you reach the bloater, you'll probably have one annoying stalker try to snatch you, so be ready to stagger or shotgun him as you run past. This may take you a couple of tries, but it's really not as hard as it may seem. Interestingly enough, I actually died behind the door the first time due to the bloater's acid bomb, but was resurrected here for the checkpoint, so that was pretty cool. I didn't find the rest of Pittsburgh to be that noteworthy, just some trial and error encounters that can almost completely be stealthed and meleeed. Now the sewers is where it gets really interesting. The storage room with the clickers can be completely stealthed without disturbing or killing the clickers in there, so don't miss out on some good material in there. The first actual encounter can usually be completely meleeed without using any ammo. When you were trapped with Sam, Mr. Monocle let me know that I can run past all of the infected, and this is a lot easier than you might think, as I've done it now multiple times. You just run through them all until you reach the ladder and give Sam a boost, and voila, you're through. On your way out of the sewers, don't let the rushing mob worry you. If you've been saving your mats, you'll certainly have more than a couple of mollies to toss. Do some melee dancing until the kids have the door open enough for you and Henry to slip through.
I see you!
Now with that bastard suburban sniper, I actually spent a couple of hours fighting my way meticulously through during my first grounded playthrough, utilizing the right side path. But on my second grounded playthrough, the Alex theory suggested that I just try the left path because she found it to be easier. What I ended up discovering very quickly on the left-hand path was that I could literally just run all the way to the sniper, which was pretty sweet and completely satisfying. Instead of spending hours here of trial and error, I simply broke into a run and slipped into his house in just a few tries. The hydroelectric dam is something you want to make sure you save a lot of good ammo and material for, because you'll have to shoot and beat your way through not one, not two, but 3 separate encounters of hunters, and it all counts as one encounter. During my first grounded playthrough, I had very little ammo when I arrived, so this was very challenging and took a long time. On my second grounded playthrough, I was very material rich, which made this a lot easier for me. The other 2 hunter encounters past this are very small and pretty straightforward, so the dam is the only thing you really need to be worried about here. The university section is pretty easy. The runners surrounding the generator can be completely stealthed, and the clickers and the bloater in the dormitory do not have to be engaged at all. You can sneak past them all, believe it or not. For the hunters that attack you in the Firefly lab, it's nothing special, just a bit of stealthing, staggering, and maneuvering. With Ellie and David in the coal mine, you have 3 separate encounters. The little room with David, the clickers by the turbines, and the final coal mine room where the bloater eventually drops in. And don't worry, these all count as 3 separate encounters. They are not linked, not even in grounded. For the first encounter, it's just going to be trial and error against the waves that come, making sure to scoop up ammo and reload the rifle in between waves. Remember that once you leave this room, you have to kill that clicker that tries to squeeze through. I didn't do this during my first grounded playthrough, and I was devastated that I had to do the whole room again. I thought none of them could get in. I thought none of them could get in on that part. The part with the clickers by the turbines is pretty straightforward and easy, but for the final room, this is the toughest part of Grounded Part 1. Once you beat this, I consider the rest of the game to be a cakewalk. I found a really good strategy by Saboteur that I executed for this room, which you can check out his guide for in the link above. It took me a bit because it's just a challenging encounter, and there's a lot of RNG to how David behaves, since it largely revolves around you using him as a shield and meleeing down the mobs that grab him. For the rest of Ellie and Joel's portions in the winter section, it's pretty standard stuff that's mostly stealthing. The one thing of note I discovered on my second grounded playthrough is that once you emerge from the tunnel with Ellie to this section, instead of doing a kill-all strat with these hunters, you can literally run all the way to the lodge and jump inside. In Salt Lake City, I hope you saved at least one shiv because you're gonna need it in the tunnels. But before that, make sure you fully upgrade your hunting rifle and El Diablo's armor-piercing capabilities, though if you didn't, it's not a game breaker. I actually didn't have them fully upgraded during my first grounded playthrough because I misspent some of my parts. Having them upgraded is just going to make these armored boys a little easier. In the tunnel though, you can literally stealth past all of the infected, take out the dormant runners in the machine hall, sneak past the clickers and bloaters, and use that one shiv on this clicker that stands in your way. Keep sneaking past the bloaters that are super close, boost Ellie and wait for her to drop the box, and voila, you good boy. At St. Mary's, I always like to start by barbecuing the first two fireflies. They are, after all, looking for the light. There are a few more fireflies that come looking for you that can easily be stealthed or brick staggered for a quick takedown grab. The rest are going to maintain a position around this nurse's station. Take out the ones you can, remembering that you can still revolver one-shot the armored boys so long as you shoot them in the legs. If an opportunity arises, try to molly 2 or 3 of these boys at the nurse's station. But much of this is just about being opportunistic, taking shots when you can, then rotating your position. Use throwables when you need to draw their attention away from you. This part is just about patience, keeping cover, taking your shots, and rotating. Once they're dealt with and you're passing through this hall, be sure to hide here and let these boys pass. Then quickly maneuver to deal with an unavoidable firefly before you get to the stairs. This will bring you to the final firefly hallway. If you have the material, you can shoot a few that are holding positions close to you in the hall. But much of this is going to be stealth negotiating the rooms that are to the right side of the hall. There are quite a few fireflies you can get rid of this way, each allowing you to progress further and, when necessary, take shots or toss bombs and flammables onto the boys in the hall. When you're spotted, just run back through these rooms to the beginning and hide. They won't really pursue and they'll lose you, and you can retry until you're finally killing the last ones by the door. I went immediately from finishing part 1 grounded to diving into part 2 grounded, and if you'd like to see my mindset and live reactions for part 2, you can check that out in episodes 231 through 244 on my Wolf of Thorns streams channel. So here's the deal with part 2. At the end of the day, I just found it to be way easier than part 1 on nearly every aspect. First and foremost, the checkpoints are the opposite of part 1. Whereas in part 1, you get a checkpoint after multiple encounters, and part 2, they give you checkpoints in the middle of encounters. Another huge difference is that the mobs in part 2 are very predictable and allow you to learn the encounters easier, whereas part 1 has a lot of RNG and mob behavior for many of the encounters. These two things made a huge difference in the difficulty for me, and that's not including the fact that part 2 has dodge mechanics and prone, which gives us simply more mitigation ability for the encounters. And I was material rich for the entire game. Just watch how I did and see for yourself. It was a constant form of surprise for me throughout the playthrough. Because so much of part 2 can be stealthed or ran through, I had so much material when I reached the arcade bloater that I was actually sad when I defeated him after about 8 minutes of trying. While playing part 2, I just never really encountered any portions of the game that challenged me the same way the dam or the coal mine did in part 1. That being said, the big Hillcrest encounter after you get the bow and leave Boris's yard can seem intimidating at first glance, but I just picked a path down the right house and trial and errored my way into a half stealth and half run strat to get through the encounter. It took me a few tries, but I got it pretty quickly, and Cory even has a slightly better way of doing this. Once you're through, you really just run through what's left of Hillcrest. And while I always found this basement encounter to historically be a pain in my balls, I don't know if it was just the inertia of my back-to-back grounded playthroughs, but instead of being stressful, I just used my material-rich arsenal to blitz my way through without too much trouble. You'll be crashing your way into a lake with Jesse in no time. Trying to sneak into the hospital was a bit of a challenge, though I was admittedly many beers and several cocktails in when I attempted it the first time, but it's all about taking your time, watching the patrols, and finding your way in. But once you pick up your mid-encounter checkpoint right about here, you can rest easy and just trial and error your way to the door. Because I wanted to get past this particular Ellie Day 3 bottleneck encounter without using any material, it was a bit of a challenge to do it that way, and my main man Cory Caliber was super awesome and made a video for me on how to do it, because he's just that stellar of a guy.
Right.
And if you want to do it without using material, as Cory shows us, you wait with Ellie and Jesse for these wolves to walk by, then crawl fall your way up this tricksy little part, keeping an eye on this female wolf standing guard. Toss a brick to distract her if you need to, but essentially you're trying to get Ellie right here where this Duder McJones walking around the corner can't see you. Then once they're past you, just run, Forrest, run your way through the encounter. Then once you're over the top and through, Jesse will resume his conversation about Dina with you as if you weren't just being shot at. I didn't look up any strategies for the flooded mall. I just had fun picking my way through it. Again, just trial and error, but having played part 2 back to back with part 1, I just was on vacation mode throughout my entire playthrough, more or less. I don't feel like there's much to mention even on Abby's portions of the game. The Rat King is seemingly the same on all difficulties, really. You just run around and make sure you don't run into a dead end. Keeping your distance is key while scooping up the infinite ammo that spawns on his level, even on grounded. As long as you're material rich when starting the fight with a Rat King and the arcade bloater, I just never found them to be challenging encounters, not when compared to the part 1 coal mine or trying to do a 3-stage hydroelectric dam encounter with virtually no ammo your first time like I did. Now don't get me wrong, if you aren't stealthing the majority of the game and you get to the bloater or the Rat King without mats, you're gonna hate yourself. But just for me personally, with the way my brain works, I found those encounters to be more fun than anything else. And really, that goes for the whole of part 2. And if you're thinking, what about this scene with the Seraphites or this encounter with these infected? If I didn't mention it here, then it really wasn't that much of an issue for me during my playthrough. And as always, if you want to see how I negotiated any of these encounters, you can find the one you're looking for pretty easy by checking out episodes 231 through 244 on my Wolf of Thorns streams channel. Left Behind is the grounded game I played last, expecting it to be the hardest of them all. It was, in fact, the easiest. Having played part 1 and part 2 on grounded and going straight into a Left Behind playthrough, I found all of the encounters to be very easy except for the final encounter where the hunters are trying to break into Joel's resting place. That was the first and only encounter that felt like a part 1 grounded encounter. It took me a while, but I finally figured out my own strategy for it, which you can check out on episode 246 over at my Wolf of Thorns streams channel. So in summary, for any grounded playthrough, there are a few things that will make this experience a lot easier than you probably think. 1. Trick yourself into being ready by playing the game on all difficulties, bumping up one difficulty at a time, and stop using listen mode because it's just not needed on any difficulty and you won't be able to use it on grounded. 2. Play to conserve material, only shooting or using mats when you absolutely have to. Stealthing is your friend. 3. Knowledge is power. Know what encounters can be stealthed through and which ones can be ran through. Obviously, if you just want to wing it, it will be harder, but it will also allow you to discover your own strategies if that's your thing, which can be fun in its own right. And all of this is how I went from being a baby mode gamer to completing all 3 The Last of Us games on grounded, officially. You should really check out my man Cory Caliber on Twitch and let him know that an old wolf sent you. In addition to being a huge The Last of Us fan and talented player, he's an awesome human being. And he's pretty easy on the ice too. If this video meant something to you, you can help me build something great by subscribing and sharing the good vibes and good spores of this content across the 4 corners of the internet. You can stay connected by joining my Discord and chatting it up with me and other members of the Wolfpack, where we're always keeping it positive and focusing on the fun. Just click on the Discord link in the description. Follow me on Twitter and show me pictures of the wolf in your life. And don't forget that I have other videos that may provide you with something you didn't know that you were searching for. Until next time, I will catch you in the wilderness of the mental. Annabelle says, it's been so amazing to watch you do this and kick the game's ass. You've grown so much since you started, and it's been fun to watch you surprise yourself. Roger says, we are like proud parents watching their kids grow. From baby grounded to big man grounded.